The instant his eyes caught the blue stone at her throat, Caleb Rourke forgot he was supposed to be invisible. He stood in the polished lobby of the Voss Meridian Center with dust on his boots, a dented tape measure clipped to his belt, and his 9-year-old daughter sitting on an overturned toolbox beside him, and he stared at the richest woman in Texas, as if she had walked in wearing a ghost. Across the marble floor, staff members froze around her like people afraid to breathe. Security men in dark suits shifted their weight. A receptionist's smile vanished. Lenora Voss, the woman business magazines called merciless and rivals called worse, stopped beneath the flood of winter sunlight falling through the glass ceiling, and the sapphire resting against her collarbone threw a blade of blue fire across the lobby. Caleb knew that setting. He knew the tiny crescent of platinum around the stone, the 3 hidden prongs shaped like prairie grass, the odd little notch near the clasp that no jeweler would have made unless he had seen the first sketch on a yellow legal pad at 2 in the morning. His late wife had drawn it at their kitchen table in Waco with a chipped pencil, humming under her breath while their baby slept in a laundry basket lined with blankets. Elise had called it the Storm Heart Necklace. She had said it would change everything. 2 weeks later, she disappeared, leaving behind a burned coffee pot, a shut-off notice, and a silence that had nearly swallowed him whole. Now that same design hung against Lenora Voss's skin as if it had belonged there all along. Caleb's clipboard slipped from his hand and cracked against the marble, the sound sharp enough to make his daughter look up. Lenora turned. Her green eyes found him, measured him, and held him still. Caleb's first instinct was to step between her and Maddie, because poor men learned quickly that powerful people did not approach without taking something. But Lenora lifted one hand, stopping her security detail before they could move. Then she crossed the lobby alone, every heel strike precise, her expression unreadable, the necklace burning blue with each step. She came close enough for Caleb to smell cold perfume and expensive wool, close enough that Maddie went quiet beside his leg. Lenora leaned near his ear and whispered, "You recognize it, don't you, Mr. Rourke? Take your daughter to the private elevator in 5 minutes. Run, argue, or call the police, and the people trying to steal her will reach your house before you do." Caleb did not move until she had already turned away. The lobby seemed to tilt, the ceiling rising too high above him, the floor too slick beneath his work boots. He watched Lenora disappear through a brushed steel door guarded by 2 men with earpieces, and for one foolish second he thought of grabbing Maddie and leaving the building. He could still feel her small fingers tucked in the back pocket of his jeans, the way she had done since she was little, and crowded places made her nervous. She had been sick the night before, coughing hard enough that he had considered canceling the measurement work, but the subcontract was all he had left after the bank took his truck trailer and the landlord taped the second warning to their duplex door. The Voss Meridian Center renovation was supposed to buy them another month, maybe 2 if he could stretch rice, beans, and peanut butter the way his mother used to. He had brought Maddie because the after-school program had finally stopped accepting his promises. She had not complained. She never did. She just carried her inhaler, her sketchbook, and the old tablet with a cracked corner, trying to be brave in a world that had been asking too much of her since she was 3. "Daddy," she said, her voice small. "Did that lady know us?" Caleb bent, picked up the clipboard, and tried to make his hands steady. "I don't know, Firefly." He looked toward the private elevator. His whole life had been shaped by people with clean hands making decisions in rooms he would never enter, but this was different. Lenora had not threatened money, work, reputation, or pride. She had mentioned Maddie. That made the choice for him. He took his daughter's backpack from the toolbox, slipped it over one shoulder, and held out his hand. "We're going upstairs for a minute. You stay right beside me." Maddie nodded, though her eyes had gone wide. Caleb hated that she had learned fear so early and silence so well. The elevator doors opened without a button being pressed, revealing an interior of smoked glass and bronze. He stepped inside with his daughter, feeling as if the building had swallowed them. The ride rose fast enough to press Maddie against his side. Numbers climbed in a soft white glow. 41, 52, 67, 79. Caleb stared at his reflection in the glass, barely recognizing the man looking back. 36 years old, shoulders still broad from framing houses and hauling beams, face roughened by sun and worry, hair needing a trim he could not justify paying for. He had once believed he would design homes, not patch roof lines and measure office columns for men half his age who called him Buddy when they forgot his name. Elise had believed in him then. At least he had thought so. She used to tell him he could see the bones of a building the way other men saw football scores. She had drawn jewelry while he drew floor plans, both of them pretending that talent and work were enough to outrun debt. When she vanished, people in town formed opinions before the police finished drinking their coffee. Some said she had run off with another man. Some said Caleb must have driven her away. Some whispered worse because grief made poor men suspicious in the eyes of strangers. Caleb had spent every spare dollar searching, hired a private investigator for 6 weeks, drove to Dallas, Austin, New Orleans, even Oklahoma City following useless tips until the investigator stopped answering and the mortgage company started calling. Maddie had asked for her mother every night for 2 years. Then, one evening while Caleb was heating soup on a hot plate because the stove had broken, she had asked if Mom was in heaven or just some place that did not have phones. Caleb had sat on the floor and cried where she could not see his face. Now the elevator opened into a penthouse office with a view stretching over downtown Dallas, the highways glowing below like streams of molten wire. Lenora Voss stood near the windows, facing the city as if she owned not only the buildings but the weather moving over them. Her office was not warm, but it was beautiful in the intimidating way museums were beautiful. Limestone walls, black walnut shelves, paintings that looked simple until Caleb realized one canvas probably cost more than every house on his block. A conference table long enough to seat a jury. On one side, a glass wall revealed a private garden terrace suspended 80 stories above the street, with bare winter branches twisting against the sky. Lenora's assistant, a narrow man with silver glasses and a tablet clutched to his chest, opened his mouth as Caleb entered. "Ms. Voss, the pension fund call is waiting, and Governor Hensley's office." "Leave us, Graham," Lenora said. "Now." The man vanished so quickly the door had barely whispered shut before Caleb found his voice. "You know my name. You know my daughter. You're wearing something my wife designed before she disappeared. So start talking before I take my child out of here and make enough noise downstairs to bring every camera in Texas." Lenora turned from the window. Up close, she looked younger than her reputation and more tired than her photographs. She wore no wedding ring. The sapphire at her throat was the only soft color on her. "If noise could save your daughter, Mr. Rourke, I would hand you a bullhorn." Maddie pressed against Caleb's leg. Lenora's gaze flicked to the child, and something almost human moved through her face before the steel came back. "There is chocolate milk in the small refrigerator behind that panel. There are colored pencils in the credenza. Your daughter may use both." "My daughter isn't a guest at your country club," Caleb said. "No," Lenora answered. "She is the reason you are still alive and standing in this office instead of being ambushed by lawyers, reporters, and a forged court order." Caleb felt anger rise, but beneath it came a colder feeling. Forged court order, lawyers, Maddie. Lenora crossed to her desk, opened a drawer, and removed a leather folder thick with paper. She laid it on the table between them. "Sit down, Caleb. This will hurt worse if you fall." He did not sit. He opened the folder with one hand while keeping the other on Maddie's shoulder. The first photograph knocked the breath out of him. Elise stood on a terrace somewhere bright and coastal, her hair shorter, her smile sharper, her hand resting on the arm of a man Caleb recognized from television business panels and old money charity scandals. Preston Vale, Lenora Voss's former husband. The man who had once been celebrated as the charming heir behind Vale Dynamics before Lenora divorced him, outmaneuvered him, and rebuilt the company without his name on the door. In the photograph, Elise wore sunglasses and a white dress, alive in a way Caleb had not allowed himself to imagine. There were other pictures. Elise stepping into a black car in Miami. Elise outside a hotel in Geneva. Elise at a private airport beside Preston, both of them laughing like people without ghosts. Caleb's knees loosened, and he sat because his body made the decision before pride could. Maddie wandered to the credenza after Lenora quietly opened it, but she kept looking back at her father. Caleb forced his face still for her sake. "Where did you get these?" he asked. "From people paid very well to watch people who believe no one can touch them." Lenora sat opposite him, crossing one leg over the other. "Your wife did not die, Mr. Rourke. She did not vanish because she was frightened of motherhood or poverty. She left because Preston Vale offered her a way into a world she thought owed her more than a rented house and a husband who worked with his hands." Caleb stared at the photographs until the colors blurred. No. It came out like a breath, not a denial. Elise was a jewelry designer. She sold earrings at church bazaars and farmers' markets. She made bracelets for nurses. She was also clever, ambitious, and angry. Lenora's voice carried no cruelty, which somehow made it worse. Preston discovered her through that necklace. He commissioned it as a gift for me during the last year of our marriage. Elise came into my home, my office, and my private charity circle under the protection of a design contract. While she was there, she copied restricted files from a secure development server. Caleb looked at the sapphire. What files? Lenora touched the necklace once, not tenderly. A defense logistics platform my company built under federal contract. It predicts equipment failures, supply vulnerabilities, and deployment risks before human analysts can see them. In the right hands, it saves soldiers' lives. In the wrong hands, it tells enemies exactly where pressure will break a system. Preston wanted it to regain control of Vale Dynamics and sell access through foreign shell companies. Elise took it for him, then refused to hand over the final encryption key. The office went silent except for the distant hum of air through vents. Maddie had found the pencils but had not colored anything. She sat on the floor with her knees tucked up, watching adults speak in voices that tried to hide disaster. Caleb shut the folder, then opened it again because the photograph of Elise seemed impossible each time, and real each time. "Why are you telling me?" he said. "Because Preston is desperate. His investors have abandoned him. Federal auditors are circling. He has debts he cannot restructure and enemies he cannot charm. There is one asset left that can save him." Lenora slid a legal summary across the table. The Vale Family Trust, old oil money, defense money, railroad money. Ugly money, but enormous. The controlling clause is unusual. Preston cannot access the principal unless he establishes legal guardianship of a direct biological descendant and presents a succession plan approved by trustees. Caleb frowned. "That's insane." Caleb frowned. It is aristocratic nonsense written by a dead man who believed bloodlines were business strategy." Lenora's mouth tightened. "Preston has no children. He also cannot have children, though he spent years making sure no one outside our marriage knew it. So he has created one." Caleb's hand moved instinctively toward Maddie, who was now drawing a crooked house with smoke coming out of the chimney. "No." Lenora slid another page forward. "Lab letterhead. DNA language. Words like probability, paternity, biological father. Caleb's vision narrowed until only Maddie's name remained. Madeline Elise Rourke. "It's false," he said. "Of course it is. Then it won't hold." Lenora looked at him the way people look at a man about to step into traffic. "You still believe truth wins because it is true. That is a luxury, Caleb. Preston has already purchased a laboratory director, 2 private investigators, and a family court consultant who knows how to make poverty look like neglect. He has photographs of your duplex, your shut-off notices, your daughter leaving a job site with you on 3 separate occasions, and medical records showing you missed 2 follow-up appointments for her asthma last year." Caleb stood so fast the chair scraped back. "I missed them because I was choosing between the copay and the electric bill. I called. I rescheduled." "I know," Lenora said. "The judge may not care when Preston's attorneys present it beside your bankruptcy filing, your overdue rent, and your wife's disappearance." Caleb's face burned. "You had no right digging through my life." "No," she said quietly. "I had a reason." Caleb wanted to hate her. It would have been easier if she had sounded smug. Instead, she sounded like a surgeon delivering a diagnosis. He walked to the window because he needed space from the folder, from Elise's face, from the idea that a man in a tailored suit could point at Maddie and call himself her father, with enough money to make the lie breathe. Far below, traffic moved along the highway. People were heading home to dinners, televisions, dogs barking at fences, ordinary arguments in ordinary kitchens. Caleb wanted his small kitchen with the broken drawer and the calendar Maddie had decorated with stickers. He wanted yesterday morning, when his worst problem had been rent. He turned back. "What do you want from me?" Lenora did not blink. "I want Preston destroyed before he can use your daughter as a key to that trust in the stolen platform. Our interests align. That's a clean way to say you need bait." "No, I need a shield around Maddie that Preston cannot penetrate quickly enough to win." She opened a second folder. This one contained contracts, court filings, trust documents, background checks, and a document with Caleb's name beside hers in a sentence that made no sense. "Petition for confidential civil marriage." "Absolutely not," Caleb said before she spoke. Lenora continued anyway. "You and I marry under seal in Tarrant County. My attorneys enter appearances on your behalf. My security team protects your home and daughter. Maddie is enrolled immediately in a private school with medical support. I establish an irrevocable trust for her, and your financial instability disappears as a weapon. If Preston files for custody, he will not face a broke single father standing alone. He will face me, my firm, my board, my federal contacts, and every attorney I have ever paid to frighten arrogant men." Caleb laughed once, without humor. "You want to marry a stranger because your ex-husband stole your military software through my wife. I want to marry a father because my ex-husband is trying to steal a child." That answer landed harder than the rest. Caleb looked at Maddie, who had started coloring the roof of her crooked house blue. She seemed too small for the forces gathering around her. "And what do you get?" he asked. "A legal alliance, public sympathy if needed, access to your testimony, pressure on Elise, protection for the company I built, and the defense platform Preston intends to sell." Lenora paused. "And perhaps the satisfaction of stopping a man who has mistaken money for permission his entire life." Caleb looked down at the proposed agreement. There were numbers in it so large they felt fake: debt payoff, housing, medical coverage, a trust for Maddie. But none of it mattered beside the one sentence that mattered most: no white unilateral custody decisions, no adoption without Caleb's written consent. No removal of Madeline from Caleb's care except by court order or medical emergency. Lenora had anticipated his fear. She had written protection against herself. He read until the words swam. He asked questions until Lenora called Graham back in and ordered coffee, sandwiches, and a family law attorney with kind eyes who spoke to Caleb, not over him. Maddie fell asleep on a leather couch beneath a cashmere throw someone had placed over her. By dusk, Caleb had learned that Preston's petition was expected within 48 hours. By night, he understood that poverty had left him with courage, but not armor. At midnight, standing on Lenora's private terrace with the city wind cutting through his shirt, he called his older brother in San Angelo and told him enough to make the man curse for 5 straight minutes. Then he called Maddie's pediatrician and left a message requesting copies of everything. Then he stood alone under the cold stars and thought about Elise. Not the woman in the photographs, but the one who had held Maddie against her chest and cried after the first asthma attack. The one who had danced barefoot in their kitchen when Caleb's first design proposal was accepted. The one who had kissed him in the rain outside a pawn shop after they sold her grandmother's ring to cover hospital bills. Had that woman been real? Or had Caleb loved a mask so completely he mistook it for a face? Near 1 a.m, he returned to the conference room. Lenora was still there, reading a federal affidavit with her shoes off and her hair loosened from its severe knot. Without the armor, she looked almost breakable, though Caleb suspected breakable things did not survive long in her world. She glanced up. "Have you decided?" "I have conditions," he said. "Maddie stays with me. Always. No boarding school. No cameras in her bedroom. No strangers touching her schedule without me knowing. No using her face in some media romance circus. And if this marriage becomes a cage, I walk." Lenora studied him. Agreed. "I mean it. I heard you, and don't call her Madeline unless she asks you to." "She likes Maddie." For the first time, Lenora's expression softened at the edges. "Then Maddie it is." Caleb picked up the pen. His hand shook once before he steadied it. "I'm not doing this for money." "I know. I'm not doing it because I trust you." "You shouldn't." He signed his name. "I'm doing it because I trust what a cornered man will do to get what he wants, and I won't let my daughter become somebody's door key." Lenora signed after him, her script clean and certain. The sapphire flashed at her throat, blue as stormlight. "Then we stop him together." The wedding happened the next afternoon in a judge's private chambers, above a courthouse that smelled faintly of old paper and floor wax. There were no flowers, no music, no smiling relatives. Maddie wore her yellow sweater with a missing button because Caleb had not packed anything suitable, and Lenora wore a cream suit that probably cost more than the judge's car. Caleb borrowed a tie from Graham, who pretended not to notice that it was too short. The vows sounded strange in the quiet room. Caleb repeated them because the law required it, but his mind snagged on words like honor and cherish and forsaking all others. He had said those words once to Elise in a Baptist church with a leaky roof while her mother cried into a tissue. He had meant them then. He meant something different now. Something sterner and less romantic, but no less binding. Protection. Duty. A line drawn in ink. When the judge pronounced them married, Maddie looked confused and whispered, "Does this mean Ms. Voss is my stepmom?" Caleb crouched in front of her. "It means she's helping us stay safe." Maddie looked at Lenora, who seemed less comfortable under the child's gaze than she had under any legal threat. "Do you know how to make grilled cheese?" Maddie asked. Lenora opened her mouth, closed it, then said, "I know how to acquire one." Maddie considered that. "Daddy burns one side, but I still eat it." Something like a smile touched Lenora's face. "Then I will study his method carefully." Caleb looked away because, unexpectedly, his throat tightened. An hour later, the sealed marriage became unsealed by design. Lenora's communications team released a brief statement about privacy, family, and a new chapter. It said nothing about Preston, Elise, forged DNA, or stolen defense technology. That did not stop the media. By evening, Caleb's face was on television beneath captions that called him mystery groom, blue-collar husband, contractor who captured Billionaire's heart. Reporters camped outside his duplex before security could move their belongings. Neighbors gave interviews beside trash bins. A woman from Caleb's church said he had always seemed devoted to his daughter. A former client said he was quiet but reliable. Someone else said he had looked haunted ever since his wife ran off. Caleb turned off the television when Maddie asked why strangers were talking about them. Lenora's home sat behind limestone walls outside Fort Worth, on land that had once been a horse ranch before money transformed it into something both grand and lonely. The house had wings, courtyards, terraces, a pool long enough to look like a canal, and rooms so untouched they felt staged for a life no one had lived. Caleb and Maddie were placed in a guest suite larger than their entire duplex. There was a bed with carved posts, a bathroom with heated floors, a closet Maddie immediately declared big enough for hide and seek, and a balcony overlooking live oaks strung with soft white lights. That first night, Caleb slept on the floor beside Maddie's bed because she asked him not to go far. Around 3 a.m, he woke to the sound of footsteps in the hallway. He opened the door quietly and found Lenora standing there in a robe, holding a folder and looking startled to be caught. "Preston filed early," she said. "Emergency petition. My attorneys blocked the temporary order before a judge signed it." Caleb absorbed the words in the dim hallway. Was he asking to take her tonight? Lenora hesitated a fraction too long. "Yes." Caleb gripped the doorframe until his knuckles paled. Inside the room, Maddie slept with one hand under her cheek. He had signed the papers, stepped into Lenora's world, and still danger had reached for his child in the dark. Lenora lowered her voice. "He failed. This time. Every time, if I can help it." Caleb looked at her then, really looked. No cameras, no assistants, no performance, just a woman standing barefoot in her own hallway at 3 a.m, carrying bad news because she thought he deserved to hear it from her. "Thank you," he said, and the words cost him less than he expected. Lenora nodded once. "There are guards at the gate and on the grounds. Not near your rooms unless you request it. I remembered your condition." Then she turned to leave. "Lenora," she paused. He had not used her first name before. "Can you send the filings to my phone?" "Of course. And tomorrow I need to go back to the duplex. Maddie's stuffed fox is there. She won't sleep right without it." Lenora's face shifted, as if she had been prepared for legal strategy but not a stuffed fox. "I'll have someone retrieve it." "No, I'll go." For a moment, he thought she would argue. Instead, she nodded. "Then I'll go with you." The next morning, 3 black SUVs followed them to the old duplex, which looked smaller than Caleb remembered and poorer than he wished Lenora had to see. The front steps sagged. The screen door had a tear patched with duct tape. A rosemary bush Elise had planted years before had gone wild beside the porch, woody and fragrant when Caleb brushed against it. He felt shame rise as Lenora stepped inside, though she said nothing. The living room held evidence of a life lived under pressure. Folded laundry on a chair, Maddie's school papers stacked beside overdue bills, a toolbox under the coffee table, a church food pantry calendar held to the fridge with a magnet shaped like a strawberry. Caleb went to Maddie's room and found the stuffed fox wedged between the bed and wall. Its fur had been loved nearly flat. When he returned, Lenora stood near the kitchen table, looking at a framed photograph of Elise holding newborn Maddie. She looked happy, Lenora said quietly. Caleb leaned against the doorway. She was good at looking how people needed her to look. Lenora accepted that without comment. On the table lay an old sketchbook Caleb had forgotten. Elise's designs filled the pages. Earrings like wings, bracelets like vines, the storm heart necklace in a dozen variations. Lenora touched the corner of one page but did not turn it. "May I?" Caleb nodded. She studied the sketches with an expression he could not read. "She was talented. She was my wife. Both can be true." Caleb looked around the kitchen, and anger came at last, not hot but heavy. "I spent 3 years defending her to people who thought she abandoned us. I told Maddie her mother loved her but got lost somehow. I made excuses because I couldn't stand the thought that my daughter had been left on purpose." Lenora closed the sketchbook. "Children often survive on the stories we are strong enough to tell them." "What story do I tell her now?" "Not all at once." Lenora looked toward Maddie's bedroom, where sunlight fell over a worn purple rug. "And not alone." It was the kindest thing she had said to him, and because Caleb did not know what to do with kindness from Lenora Voss, he picked up a box and began packing. Life inside the ranch estate settled into a rhythm that was not normal, but became familiar. Caleb drove Maddie to school himself despite Lenora's offer of a driver. A security car followed at a distance. Maddie pretended not to notice, though once she asked if the men were secret superheroes, and Caleb said they were more like very serious crossing guards. She started at St. Agnes Preparatory 2 weeks later after Caleb visited every classroom, met the nurse twice, and made sure no one would treat his daughter like a headline. Lenora had arranged everything, but she stayed outside the school office until Caleb invited her in. That mattered. He noticed. During the day, Caleb returned to the Voss Meridian Center, not as a lobby ghost but as a consultant with a revised contract and enough authority to make senior architects resent him politely. He insisted on earning the work. Lenora did not insult him by arguing. The atrium renovation became his refuge. He redesigned the indoor garden so the central supports resembled branching pecan trees, softened the stone with native plants, and added a shallow water channel that would catch the Texas light in late afternoon. "Buildings should give people somewhere to breathe," he told Lenora one evening when she found him reviewing plans at her dining table. "Most corporate towers do the opposite." She stood behind him, looking over the drawings. "My tower intimidates people." "I know. I've seen the lobby. That was intentional. I know that too." She leaned closer and he caught the clean scent of her hair, different from the cold perfume she wore in public. "You disapprove?" "I think a building can show strength without making ordinary people feel small." Lenora was quiet for so long he thought he had offended her. Then she said, "Show me how." From then on, she asked questions, not the empty kind rich people asked before ignoring the answer, but precise questions about light, load, movement, materials, cost, maintenance, and whether a bench placed beneath the west wall would catch too much glare. Caleb found himself answering in detail. He found himself forgetting, for a few minutes at a time, that their marriage was a legal strategy built on fear. Maddie adjusted to Lenora in her own cautious way. At first, she called her Ms. Voss and whispered around her as if loud noises might trigger alarms. Lenora did not know how to speak to children, which Maddie seemed to find interesting rather than offensive. Their first real conversation happened over a science project involving a shoebox, string lights, and a model of the solar system. Caleb entered the breakfast room to find Lenora in a charcoal suit, hair pinned tight, sitting beside Maddie with a glue stick in one hand and a look of grave concentration. "Jupiter has too many stripes," Lenora said. Nature didn't ask your opinion, Maddie replied, not looking up. Caleb nearly dropped his coffee. Lenora considered the child, then nodded. Fair. After that, Maddie began saving questions for her. Why did grown-ups buy paintings that looked like mistakes? Did helicopters have seatbelts? Could lawyers go to jail if they lied? Did Lenora ever get scared? The last question came one rainy Sunday while Caleb was repairing a loose hinge in the mudroom. He stopped hammering. Lenora, who had been reviewing documents on a bench nearby while Maddie braided the fringe of a throw blanket, did not answer immediately. Yes, she said at last. Maddie looked surprised. Of what? Lenora's eyes flicked to Caleb, then back to the child. Of failing people who depend on me. Maddie nodded solemnly, as if this made perfect sense. Daddy gets scared of that too. Caleb went back to the hinge, blinking more than the dust required. That night, Lenora tried to make grilled cheese. She burned one side exactly as Caleb did, though he suspected she had done it on purpose after studying his method. Maddie declared it acceptable. Lenora looked absurdly pleased, but peace in a rich man's war was never more than the space between attacks. Preston Vale began with whispers. Anonymous financial blogs suggested Caleb had manipulated a lonely billionaire for money. A tabloid published old photographs of his duplex beside aerial shots of Lenora's estate. Someone leaked his bankruptcy. Another outlet implied Maddie's asthma had been neglected. Caleb read the headlines in the truck outside school and felt the familiar shame open inside him like an old wound. By afternoon, Lenora's legal team had issued demands, but the damage had already reached the playground. Maddie came home quiet, her backpack hanging low, her face pale with the effort not to cry. Caleb found out from another parent that a boy had asked whether her dad sold her to a rich lady. Caleb had to walk out behind the garage before he could trust himself to speak. Lenora found him there splitting wood with more force than necessary. Give me the name, she said. Caleb swung the axe down. Of a child? Of whoever fed that child the sentence. He rested the axe handle against the chopping block. This is what your world does. It turns people into stories it can use. Lenora stepped closer, rain misting in her hair. Preston's world. Not mine. You own half the newspapers that scare men like me into keeping their heads down. I own shares in media companies. I do not own cruelty. But you know how to use it. The words hung between them. He regretted them almost immediately, not because they were entirely false, but because her face changed in a way he had not intended. The steel came up, but behind it something wounded flickered. Yes, she said. I do. I learned from people who used it on me first. That does not excuse it. She looked toward the house, where Maddie's bedroom light glowed warm against the rain. I will not use your daughter as a weapon, Caleb, but I will use every weapon I have to defend her. He set down the axe. The rain ticked against the tin roof of the wood shelter. I don't want her defended so hard she forgets how to be a child. Lenora's voice softened. Then teach me where the line is. That disarmed him more than any argument could have. He nodded once. We start by not suing a fifth grader. The corner of Lenora's mouth moved. A challenge, but I'll adapt. The public confrontation came 6 weeks later at a veterans medical fundraiser held inside the renovated hall of an old railroad depot in Fort Worth. Lenora had chosen the event because Voss Dynamics was announcing a major donation to prosthetics research, and her team believed appearing with Caleb and Maddie would quiet rumors of a paper marriage. Caleb hated the idea of bringing Maddie, but she wanted to wear her blue dress and see the therapy dogs promised in the invitation. He agreed only after inspecting the exits like a man preparing for a storm. The depot was all brick, brass, and warm light, filled with donors, retired officers, surgeons, politicians, and camera crews pretending not to wait for something dramatic. Lenora wore a dark green gown and the sapphire necklace. Caleb wore a suit tailored so well he felt disguised, though his hands still looked like his own, scarred and square and brown from sun. Maddie stayed close, one hand tucked into his jacket pocket. For the first hour, nothing went wrong. Lenora spoke with hospital administrators. Caleb met a retired Marine who asked smart questions about the atrium redesign. Maddie found a golden retriever wearing a red vest and forgot to be nervous. Then Preston Vale walked in as if the entire event had been arranged for his entrance. He was handsome in the artificial way of men who paid professionals to preserve charm after character failed. Silver at the temples, perfect tuxedo, smile bright enough for cameras and empty enough for Caleb to distrust immediately. At his side stood Elise. Caleb saw her before Maddie did. She wore black satin and diamonds, her hair swept back, her face thinner than in memory, but unmistakably alive. The room blurred. For 3 years he had imagined finding her in hospital records, river reports, nameless shelters, graveyards. He had not imagined her walking toward him under chandeliers with a press badge camera turning in her direction. Maddie followed his stare. The child's hand tightened in his pocket. "Daddy?" she whispered. Elise stopped 10 feet away, and the confidence on her face broke for 1 second when she saw her daughter. "Maddie," she said, voice trembling beautifully, as if rehearsed heartbreak had finally met something real. Caleb moved in front of Maddie before he could think. Lenora stepped beside him, not ahead, and he understood the courtesy even in his shock. Preston smiled for the nearest cameras. Lenora. Caleb. What an extraordinary family portrait. His eyes dropped to Maddie. And this must be the little girl everyone is fighting so hard over. Caleb's voice came out low. "Don't speak to her." Elise lifted a hand. "Caleb, please. I know what you think. I know how this looks." "Do you?" He could barely hear himself over the blood pounding in his ears. "Because from here it looks like my dead wife came to a fundraiser on the arm of the man trying to take my daughter." Murmurs rippled around them. Phones rose despite staff trying to stop them. Elise's eyes filled with tears, but Caleb no longer trusted tears just because they fell. "I left to protect you both," she said. "Preston threatened us. He said if I didn't help him, he would ruin you. And then he would take Maddie anyway. I thought if I got close enough, I could collect proof." Preston's smile tightened. "Careful, Elise." Lenora's voice cut through the room. "No, let her continue. I'm fascinated by performances with poor structure." Elise's grief hardened into irritation so quickly, Caleb almost flinched. There she was, not the kitchen table dreamer, not the lost wife, but someone sharper, someone tired of pretending for people she considered slower than herself. She opened a small clutch and removed a flash drive attached to a silver key ring. The tiny object seemed to pull all warmth from the hall. Lenora went still. Preston's eyes flashed with hunger. "I have the platform key," Elise announced. "I have the lab records proving Preston bought the paternity result. I have emails, transfers, names. I can end this tonight." Caleb felt Maddie trembling behind him. He wanted to carry her out, but Elise's next words pinned him in place. "But I want immunity. I want safe passage. And I want my daughter to know I am not the villain in this story." The hall erupted in whispers. Preston stepped toward her, furious. "You stupid woman. We had an agreement. You had a leash," Elise snapped. "I chewed through it." Lenora looked at the flash drive, then at Elise. "You stole classified adjacent defense technology, hid it for 3 years, let your husband and child collapse into poverty, then arrived at a charity event demanding applause for delayed honesty." Elise's face flushed. "You used him too. You married him because he was useful." Lenora did not deny it. That was why Caleb believed her when she answered. At first, that quiet admission shifted something in the room. Caleb looked at Lenora, but she was watching Maddie, not the cameras, not the donors, not the flash drive. Maddie peered from behind Caleb's jacket with tears running silently down her face. Elise saw them and seemed to falter. "Baby," she whispered. Maddie shook her head once. It was small, but it landed with the force of a door closing. "You didn't call on my birthday," Maddie said. Elise's mouth opened. No explanation came out quickly enough. Preston lunged for the flash drive. Caleb moved before security did. Years of lifting lumber, catching falling beams, and carrying sleeping children gave him a speed no one expected from a man in a tailored suit. He caught Preston by the lapel and drove him backward into a banquet table hard enough to rattle water glasses. Gasps burst around them. Caleb did not hit him. He wanted to. Every part of him wanted one clean swing for the nights Maddie cried, for the bills, for the shame, for the forged papers calling another man her father. Instead, he held Preston there, forearm across his chest, and spoke so quietly, the nearest microphones strained to catch it. "You don't move toward my family again." Preston's face had gone red. "You have no idea who you're touching." "I know exactly who I'm touching," Caleb said. "A man who needs a child to open a bank vault because he couldn't build anything worth keeping." Preston's confidence broke. Not completely, but enough for everyone close to see it. Then the side doors opened, and federal agents entered with the calm of people who had not come to negotiate. They wore dark jackets marked with letters that made the donors step back fast. One moved to Preston, two went to Elise. Another approached Lenora and received a sealed envelope from Graham, who had appeared near the wall as silently as a shadow. Preston began shouting about lawyers, trustees, political friends, and family legacy. The agents did not care. Elise did not shout. She stared at Caleb as if only then understanding that he was not the desperate husband she had left behind, not the man who would mistake her return for redemption. She held out the flash drive before anyone could take it by force. "I did love you," she said. Caleb looked at her, and grief passed through him one final time, not as a wound, but as weather moving out. "Maybe," he said. "But you loved winning more." Elise lowered her eyes. The agent took the drive. Maddie began to sob, and Caleb turned away from the ruin of his old life to gather his daughter in his arms. The scandal broke before dawn. By breakfast, every screen in America seemed to show the same footage. Preston Vale in handcuffs, Elise Rourke escorted through a side entrance, Caleb holding back a billionaire heir with one arm, while Lenora Voss stood beside a crying child. Commentators argued over whether the marriage had begun as strategy or romance. Former prosecutors explained wire fraud, bribery, custody manipulation, and defense contract violations with the brisk delight of people who did not have to live inside the wreckage. Vale Trust assets were frozen pending federal review. The fraudulent DNA petition collapsed. The lab director resigned before lunch and was indicted before the week ended. Elise agreed to cooperate, though cooperation could not erase what she had done. Lenora's board praised her discipline. Investors praised her foresight. Veterans groups praised the recovered platform once officials confirmed it had not been sold abroad. Strangers praised Caleb's restraint in comments beneath videos he wished had never existed. None of it helped Maddie, who spent 2 days refusing school, sleeping with the stuffed fox under her chin and asking questions no father could answer cleanly. Did Mom leave because of me? Did she watch us after she left? Did she know I was scared? Would she go to jail? Would she still be my mother if she did? Caleb answered as honestly as he could without handing a child the full weight of adult betrayal. "She made choices that hurt us," he said, sitting beside Maddie under the quilt. That does not mean you were not worth staying for. It means something was broken in her that we could not fix. Maddie cried until she slept. Caleb stayed beside her long after, one hand resting lightly on her back the way he had done when she was a baby, fighting for breath in a hospital crib. On the third evening after the fundraiser, Caleb found Lenora in the suspended garden outside her penthouse office. Dallas shimmered below, but up there the wind moved softly through winter grass planted in steel troughs. The storm heart necklace was gone from her throat. In her hands, she held Elise's old sketchbook, the one from the duplex. I should have asked before taking it from the evidence review, she said. I'll return it. Caleb leaned against the railing beside her. Keep it for now. She looked surprised. Why? Because I don't know what to do with it yet. The sky was violet at the edges, the city lights coming alive one by one. For a while, neither spoke. Their marriage contract could be dissolved now. The custody threat was dead. Maddie was legally safe with Caleb. Lenora's company was secure. The alliance had served its purpose. Caleb had expected relief to feel like open space, but instead it felt like standing in a house after a storm and realizing the roof had held because someone else had been bracing the door with you. Lenora opened the sketchbook to the necklace design. I kept wearing it because I was angry, she said. At first it reminded me never to underestimate betrayal. Then you saw it in the lobby and it became something else. A warning? A bridge. Caleb glanced at her. She closed the book. I have spent my life assuming people either wanted to use me or feared being used by me. It made things simple. Lonely, but simple. Her voice was steady, though softer than he had ever heard it. You complicated that. Caleb looked out over the city. You did some complicating yourself. The agreement can be ended tomorrow, she said. Graham has the documents ready. The trust for Maddie remains. Your debts remain paid. The school, medical care, security for as long as you wanted. All of that stays. I will not punish you for leaving a battlefield after the battle is over. Caleb smiled faintly. That's the most romantic thing anyone's ever said to me. Lenora looked horrified for half a second, then realized he was teasing. A laugh escaped her, brief and unguarded. He liked that sound more than he wanted to admit. I'm serious, she said. So am I. He turned toward her. I don't know what this is. I know what it started as. I know it wasn't clean. I know we were both scared, even if you hide it under better tailoring. But Maddie trusts you. Not because you bought her things, because you showed up. You listened when she corrected your planets. You burned grilled cheese because she missed home. You stood beside me instead of in front of me when Elise walked in. Lenora's eyes shone, though no tears fell. Caleb. And I trust you, he said. The words surprised him by being true. Not blindly, not like a fool, but enough to stay and see what we can build when nobody's forcing us. Lenora looked at him for a long moment, and in that silence, Caleb understood how unfamiliar it was for her to be offered something without terms. She had built an empire by reading the fine print of every human exchange. Now there was only a man in a work jacket standing in the wind, offering no guarantee except effort. She stepped closer. I don't know how to be ordinary, she said. Good, he answered. I've had enough ordinary hardship to last a lifetime. That brought the laugh back, warmer this time. Then her face grew serious. I do not want to replace Elise. You couldn't. I do not want Maddie to feel bought, managed, or displayed. Then don't buy, manage, or display her. You make it sound simple. It isn't. But most important things are plain, even when they're hard. Lenora looked down at the sketchbook again. And us? Caleb took the book gently from her hands and set it on the bench. Same rule. He kissed her then, not like a man sealing a bargain or thanking a rescuer, but like a man stepping carefully onto a bridge he had chosen to cross. Lenora went still for one heartbeat. Then her hand rose to his chest, fingers curling into the worn canvas of his jacket, as if she needed proof he was real. Behind them, inside the office, phones rang unanswered. Far below, traffic moved through the city. For once, neither of them looked toward the noise. Spring came slowly, then all at once. The atrium at the Voss Meridian Center opened in April beneath a canopy of glass and living green. Caleb's design changed the building more than anyone expected. Sunlight spilled through leaves onto stone benches. Water moved in a thin silver ribbon around the central columns. Office workers ate lunch beside native ferns. Couriers rested their feet. A janitor told Caleb the lobby no longer felt like it was trying to kick him out. That compliment meant more to him than the architecture award that came later. Lenora attended the opening without the sapphire. Instead, she wore a simple silver chain Maddie had chosen from a local craft market. Reporters noticed. They noticed everything. They wrote that marriage had softened Lenora Voss, which made Caleb laugh because nothing about her had softened in board meetings, negotiations, or legal depositions. What had changed was where she allowed her strength to point. She still frightened arrogant men. She still dismantled dishonest deals with surgical precision, but she came home earlier twice a week. She learned the names of Maddie's teachers. She stopped scheduling calls during Sunday breakfast after Maddie placed a handwritten sign beside her plate that said, "No billionaire stuff," before pancakes. The sign remained on the sideboard. Preston awaited trial from a federal facility where his family name opened fewer doors than he expected. Elise entered a plea and was sentenced to prison, not as long as Caleb sometimes thought justice required, but long enough for Maddie to grow without wondering if her mother would appear at the school gate. Caleb allowed letters after speaking with a counselor. The first ones were clumsy, full of apology and self-defense. Maddie read them when she felt ready and answered only once. "I hope you learn how to tell the truth before you come back." Caleb mailed it without changing a word. By summer, the ranch estate no longer felt like a museum pretending to be a home. Caleb converted an unused carriage house into a workshop and design studio, where Maddie painted planets on scrapwood, and Lenora occasionally sat with her laptop pretending not to enjoy the smell of sawdust. They planted rosemary by the kitchen terrace, because Caleb had taken a cutting from the old duplex before handing back the keys. He expected the plant to die in the richer soil. It did not. It grew stubbornly, sending up fragrant green shoots in the Texas heat. One evening after a thunderstorm, Caleb found Maddie and Lenora kneeling beside it, both of them muddy, trying to rescue a worm from a puddle. Lenora was wearing shoes entirely wrong for mud. Maddie was giving instructions with great authority. Caleb stood under the porch light watching them, and the ache in him was not grief. It was gratitude, which he trusted less because it made a man feel exposed. Maddie saw him and waved. "We saved him, Daddy." Lenora lifted the worm on a leaf with the intense focus of a woman negotiating a merger. His strategic outlook has improved. Caleb laughed so hard Maddie laughed too, and Lenora, after trying to remain dignified, gave up and joined them. The sound moved across the wet garden, bright and strange and alive. Months later, when people asked Caleb how a contractor from Waco ended up married to Lenora Voss, he never told the story the way newspapers told it. He did not speak first of money, scandal, federal agents, stolen technology, or the sapphire necklace that had pulled a ghost out of hiding. He spoke of a lobby where a frightened father had been seen by a woman who could have looked away. He spoke of a child who deserved more than being used as proof in a rich man's lie. He spoke of how truth did not arrive like lightning, clean and holy, but had to be dug out from under fear, pride, greed, and old pain by people willing to stand still when running would be easier. Caleb did not become a different man because wealth entered his life. He became more fully the man hardship had been trying to bury, patient, steady, watchful, unwilling to surrender love to bitterness. Lenora did not become gentle in the way strangers expected women to become gentle for a happy ending. She became honest. She learned that power without tenderness was only another locked room, and tenderness without courage could not protect anyone. Together they built a life neither would have imagined and both had needed. On quiet nights, when Maddie slept and the house settled around them, Caleb sometimes held the old sketchbook and studied the storm heart necklace. Elise had believed that design would change everything. In a way, she had been right, though not as she intended. The necklace had not bought freedom, status, or victory. It had exposed lies. It had led a desperate father into a room where fear became a choice. It had introduced him to a woman who understood foundations because she had spent her life building over fault lines. And in the end, the strongest thing Caleb ever built was not the atrium of glass and trees, not the restored carriage house, not even the safe new walls around his daughter's life. It was a family formed after betrayal, tested by power, and held together not by contracts or blood or public approval, but by the simple daily decision to stay, to tell the truth, and to stand beside one another when the ground began to shake. This story reminds us that the strongest families are not always the ones untouched by pain, but the ones brave enough to rebuild after everything falls apart. Caleb's journey teaches us that love is not proven by perfect words, expensive promises, or blood alone. Love is proven in the moments when fear is screaming, when betrayal has broken your trust, and when walking away would be easier than standing firm. He had every reason to become bitter, yet he chose to protect his daughter with patience, courage, and truth. Lenora had power, wealth, and influence, but she learned that strength without kindness can become just another wall. Together, they showed us that real healing begins when people stop using each other and start standing beside each other. Life will sometimes expose lies through heartbreak, but it can also lead us toward unexpected grace. The lesson is simple, but powerful. Never let betrayal turn your heart cold, and never underestimate the quiet courage of someone fighting for the people they love. If this story touched your heart, tell us in the comments. What would you have done in Caleb's place? And if you believe in stories about love, truth, sacrifice, and second chances, please subscribe to the channel and join us for more emotional stories that remind us what truly matters.